And there we go. We'll be posting the recording to our academic business area in the community probably later this week. So if you want to see the webinar over again, or you want to go back and review something that was discussed, you can view the recording later this week on our student community. We hope you find the presentation informative and instructive. But before we get started, I just want to take a moment and ensure everybody's ready and familiar with the webinar control panel. I'm not sure whether everybody knows how to use that. First thing, you should have a control panel on the right side of your screen. You can minimize the control panel by clicking on the arrow button in the upper left-hand corner of the control panel. That'll allow you to minimize it, and then you can also click on that arrow to maximize it again. So just take a moment and try that out. Just make sure that works for you. Second, you're all in listen mode tonight. We have quite a few students, so in order for to keep background noise and things like that down, you'll be in listen mode, and you'll be able to submit questions and answer questions by Devi during the webinar using the question pane, which is located near the bottom of that control panel. So why don't we just make sure everybody knows how to use that, because this is very interactive. You'll have a chance to answer questions as well as ask them. Just type in your name and where you're from in the question box, and we'll just make sure that everybody's familiar with how to use that question box. So go ahead and do that now. Okay, looks like we got quite a few people here. Arizona, Florida, New York, Ohio, Texas, Tennessee. So it looks like we have a good group here. And it looks like everybody knows how to use that. California, Illinois, Washington State. So looks like we have a good group. Okay, so everybody's got an idea of how to use that. Well, we have somebody from Egypt here. So Georgia, Maryland. Okay, good. So well then, basically we're going to allow 1 hour for this webinar. We may go over a little bit or under a little bit depending on questions. This is a very interactive presentation. We're going to be looking for you to participate. It's kind of a fun presentation, and as Devi will talk about, you'll see that it's kind of an example of things that you will learn in our Introduction to Business course. So let's get started. Today, the presenter is Devi Vallabhaneni. She's earned a MBA from Harvard Business School and received her undergraduate degree from the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. Devi currently serves on the admissions board for Harvard Business School for outreach and evaluation of candidates worldwide. Among other things, she's the author of our Introduction to Business course at Penn Foster. So feel free to ask questions or respond to Devi's questions throughout the webinar. We have a large number of students. So I'll be monitoring questions and comments, and we'll try at various points throughout the webinar to address many of the questions as possible. So I'm going to turn over the mic to Devi, and it's all yours. Take it away.
Thanks, Russell, and thank you everyone for joining this evening. I think you'll find our topic fun, and I hope a lot of people have played Pokemon, so we would love your comments and your experiences. This is very interactive. We will pause every so often for your comments and feedback and participation. It's not necessary, but I think you'll find it important. It's not hard what we're going to ask. It's really just to share what you've experienced, and the whole point of this is really to build upon the Intro to Business course. A lot of the topics that we talk about are covered in there, and it really brings to life in terms of some of the business concepts that you learn. Business isn't necessarily theoretical. It's part of everything we do and enjoy, such as Pokemon, that our webinars are really designed to bring topics that you learn in class to life. So with that said, why don't we jump to the second slide and just spend a minute of what you're going to see over the next hour. So and just before I continue, I do talk fast because there is a lot to cover. So if you want me to repeat something or just go over, you can just send a note and everything. But like I said, we will pause to make sure that we can take people's comments. So Pokemon is our topic today. We're going to talk about the company background, the business side of Pokemon, and talk about what's next. So that's, but then obviously in each one there will be a lot of other detail and whatnot. So it'll be fun. So let's jump in and move to the next slide.
Okay. There you go.
Great, thank you. So Pokemon was founded actually in the 90s by a gentleman named Satoshi Tajiri in Japan. And as a teenager, he was, obsessed and, loved video games. And at that point, he actually won a video game idea competition when he was a teenager in Japan still. And in 1990, so I don't know how many of you either have played with a Game Boy or remember a Game Boy or even seen a Game Boy. Those were kind of the first multiplayer game devices. Like you'd play around, I remember I had one. You'd play a game and then you pass it to a friend and they play their round. So it was always kind of you play your turn, but then you hand the device over to somebody else to play against somebody. And what Satoshi did is he actually at that point connected two Game Boys so you can play together. So that was I think his concept was, well, how do you play with people? And this was very early on, and that was kind of his goal, is how do you make it something real time, you play with people, and all that. And so his whole kind of life obsession, life goal was video games. And at that time, he thought of Pokemon and kind of the ecosystem behind it, the characters and everything in 1995. And there were three companies that kind of bought into his vision. And Nintendo was one of them, and Nintendo's obviously still very involved. And so, so it's three companies that are behind Pokemon. And just as many people probably either have heard or played or have friends who've played or family members who've played, Pokemon Go is the mobile version of Pokemon that was released last year. And since last year, it's earned over $1 billion in revenue worldwide. And it's one of the top selling or top grossing mobile games ever. And so we're going to kind of dig a little bit deeper of what that means and how did it get to be that way. There are a lot of games that you can play. We have more options than we'll ever have time for right now off of our phone and off of our devices. So why is it that Pokemon was able to be that successful in such a short amount of time? So let's take a quick pause here. Any comments, thoughts? Well, actually, I take that back. Let's move to the next slide, and I think we'll be able to probably have a better time for a pause. So, and this is, kind of a good segue to be able to say, this is your time, and we'd love to hear kind of your experiences about Pokemon, like why do you like it? When have you played? What do you like about it? What's fun about it for you? And so we want to, make sure we hear your personal experience, but then also, as part of that, what, when we say competitive advantage, like what does Pokemon do better than other games? Like why do you like it compared to other games? And you'll have to forgive me, I'm not a big mobile game player, so I may not know other top games, but what is it that you like that versus other games you play? Like, and who would you consider Pokemon's competitors? And then talk about what Pokemon can do next. So this would be a great place to pause to get your experiences and your feedback and everything, especially for those who've played Pokemon. And even if you haven't played Pokemon, you've probably heard about it and or read about it, or you have your friends talk about it. So, so with that said, I'll turn it over to Russ briefly to see what comments are coming in.
Okay, we have a couple comments here. We have somebody who hasn't played Game Boy but has played the Pokemon Go on their cell phone. That's Natasha. And we have Deneen, I believe. Her son has done the Pokemon trading cards.
Mm-hmm.
And looks like we have Claire, who's been playing Pokemon since '96. So
that's great. We're so right after it started.
Yeah. So those are the ones I have at the moment. Anybody else? Oh, here we go. Okay.
Now they're pouring in. Yeah.
Now they're pouring in here. Okay. I was starting to worry there, you guys. So let's see here. Hang on a minute. I got to catch up here. So we have Dominic. He's played Pokemon when he was younger. Let's see here. They keep popping in here so fast I'm having trouble keeping up. So bear with me a second. Okay, we've got Shannon. She grew up watching Pokemon, collecting cards, playing Pokemon on her Game Boy. When Pokemon Red was first out, let's see, Anna Alicia, I play Pokemon card game, and my children have played them since 1996 as well. So it looks like we have quite a few people here who go back that far. There's some that have never played, Philippe and Susan. Let's see, Colin, I've seen some TV episodes, traditional card game, and draw characters. I'm also old enough to remember Game Boys. I'm in the mid-20s. Played Pokemon, big fan. That's Francisca. So it looks like we have a group of people here.
Great, a good variety.
Good variety.
So it sounds like a good variety of experiences with Pokemon. So
right.
People who've never played it, all the way to people who've kind of played with it in the early days, and then some people who've probably tried the Pokemon Go, or at least have family members who've used Pokemon Go. So good. That's a good kind of background, and I'm glad to see the variety of experience. I think that'll make for even richer discussion.
Okay.
So so in terms of the competitive advantages, I think we will probably include or make sure we cover that as we go. But in terms of, I would imagine this is one of their competitive advantages, is that they've been around for a really long time, right? Like 95, that's 30 years later that people are still talking about it. There's still familiarity. It's not like it's a brand new game that you have to get the word of mouth and awareness. So I would imagine one of its competitive advantages is that it has been around for a long time, and as people have alluded to, there are playing cards, there's TV, there these characters, and the Pokemon world lives outside and in other formats. So I think the fact that the familiarity is what is probably driving some of their success today, even though it's a mobile game, right? And that's just kind of a new device that you're using versus, oh, you're already familiar with Pokemon. So I think that is really part of it. And then in terms of competitors, obviously we can say it's other games. We can probably say it's Pokemon versus like the TV in terms of time spent in front of a device. It could be, I would even argue that Facebook can be a competitor, because when you're on your computer, or sorry, when you're on your phone or on your device, what are you doing? You're texting, you could be on Facebook, you could be playing a game. So it's also how you view your device and time on it. That could be a competitor. It's not just about, is it Pokemon or Candy Crush, another game per se. So it's a way of being able to say, well, how do we compete based on the actual product itself. So if it's a product, in this case it's a game, how do they view other games, but then also in terms of, because it's device driven, well, if you're on your device doing one thing, well, that means you can't be doing another thing. So that would be another way that companies would consider competitors of taking away from something else. And in terms of how can Pokemon innovate, well, I think we'll cover that and we'll circle back to that as we finish up today. So with that said, let's move on to the next slide.
Okay.
So I wanted to put this in here because the business of mobile gaming, now when I was doing the research, it is amazing in terms of that these are what's listed here. These are the top games of 2016. Pokemon, so out of all the people who played a mobile game, Pokemon was the #1 game that people played. That means out of all gamers, 11% of all gamers played Pokemon, and then on and on and on. So in such a short amount of time, right, like the Pokemon was only available in mid 2016. We're talking Pokemon Go. And within 6 months that it beat everybody else by a wide margin is pretty incredible in terms of why it's so popular, and or the reach of its popularity, right? The extent of its popularity. That's a really hard thing to achieve. You weren't live for 6 months, but yet you kind of beat everybody else in terms of the between time spent, the revenue, the number of people it attracted. So it's pretty telling that this is a phenomenon that's probably here to stay because of that kind of long-lasting power. Before we let's go to the next slide, and then we'll take a pause.
Okay.
However, then when you kind of compare and contrast that, so the first slide that we talked about was talking about Pokemon as the #1 most popular game. However, on this slide, when you look at how much people are spending on Pokemon versus other games, it's not the top spending one per person, right? So this is what we call, like, the first slide where we talked about the breadth, right? Pokemon captured the breadth of the market, means a lot of people are playing it. Now we're going to talk about depth, or like a niche program or a niche game. And so the Game of War, Fire Age, and so I clearly I'm not a gamer, because when I was researching this, it's like that's not a game that I've heard of, nor do I play it. But that is the #1 game in terms of the users that play it. It's the most that they spend. So the average Game of War player spends over $300 playing that game, whereas the average Pokemon player spends $32. So we're talking about a 10 times difference. So this is what we mean by kind of like a niche versus broad customer. The Pokemon Go, it has a broad base of customers, right? It's the #1 game, which means there's a lot of people playing it, but in terms of per person spend, it's the least amount that they're spending, but that's okay because they have a large, they're making it up on volume, right? Whereas like Game of War, it's probably obviously not one of it is probably a really top selling game, but each player spends so much money. So for them, they don't need the quantity of users, they just need, their strategy is that they need people who just love the game, because if you love it, you're gonna pay. And so these are two very different strategies in terms of it's, you know, it would be like the kind of the same concept of like somebody you know, shopping at Walmart, because it's Walmart's making money based on volume of customers, right? They're a very large store, and because they can accommodate the vast amount of customers, right? Like you need a toothbrush, okay, great. We need clothes, great. You have, they can reach out to a wide range of customers, whereas let's say Petco, let's just say like Petco probably has fewer customers because it's only for people who have pets, right? It's just by nature it's a niche company, whereas Walmart, it's a general merchandise store, so it appeals to so many people. So I think when you're a game, whether you're a game provider or any other type of product or service, you kind of have to decide, what do you want to be? Do you want to be a game that's great for everybody, or a product that's great for everybody, or are you really kind of focusing on a niche audience? And so here you can see in terms of, it's not, one way is not better than the other. It's more of, I think people have to decide where they want to be, and do you have a product that it will actually achieve that. So before we go on to the next slide, why don't we take a pause here and just kind of, if you guys have any questions or comments or kind of thoughts about what we've been talking about, it would be great to, you know, take a pause and let those come in.
Yeah, we have Jean-Philippe indicated in-purchase buys, and I think that's kind of the difference between those two.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Okay, probably. I don't see any other comments at this point. Oh, well, now that I said that.
Of course.
So that means Pokemon Go is better for the consumer in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, it could be in terms of it. Yeah, I think one way of looking at this is that Pokemon Go probably reaches a wide audience in terms of, you know, you see so many people playing together, and it reaches all, you know, probably a lot of different demographics, and whereas other games might be very focused in in their audience in terms of types of people that they want. Maybe they're heavy game users, where I would imagine Go, they're heavy game users, and also the casual game user. Like if somebody in my family wanted to play Pokemon Go, even though I've never played it, yeah, I probably would play with them. So that's one thing. I could see myself playing Pokemon Go, where as opposed to like game of War. You know, and I think it's because of what we talked about earlier on and kind of all your comments. I'm familiar with Pokemon Go. It doesn't feel like, oh my God, what is this? It doesn't feel strange because I've never heard of it. So I think that has a lot to do with it, is that familiarity breeds like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll try it. Whereas if you've never heard of something, you have a higher hurdle to say, yeah, okay, let me try it out. So I think that's my theory. Obviously, in terms of everybody else can be a little bit different, but you know, I think some of the earlier comments of saying, you know, their son plays it or whatever. Well, even if you've never played it, if you're somewhere to ask you, you know, to play it, because you're already familiar with it, you might go along, right? And the whole point of Pokemon is that it's virtual reality. So you can participate. There's not a hurdle for you to participate through your phone.
I've got another question here from Brittany. Do you think they have the upper hand with the app and also their DS systems having incentives for walking around and being active, etc.?
So Brittany, you've alluded to a point that we're going to discuss in a couple of slides, but that's exactly right. I think they were just very smart in how they organized it. So it's hard to play Pokemon Go. I'm sure people play it alone, right? But it's probably better if you play it with a group. So inherently, the nature of the game is kind of invites other people, and it's probably even more fun for the user to invite people who are not so good at it, right? Like in terms of it, that it's the group effort, that's the group energy that makes it fun. So probably the larger group, the more fun it is. And so because of that, it is just a something that appeals to everybody. You don't have to be great at a game per se. You have to be good at real life. Like, okay, you go to a place where you're going to go catch Pokemons or all that. And so I think you absolutely hit it on the head. I think the nature of the game design is what leads it to a high volume of people. But that's very smart. Right, like if we go back to the history of Pokemon, when we talked about that, that the founder wanted to play with other people, that was kind of the core belief and what really drove him. And so you can see that that's what's been kind of held throughout as like a common thread of why that it's so successful now, and it's been able to morph with so many different technologies, right? Like technology's changed so much since Game Boys. We didn't have cell phones then, but we had a device. So clearly he was always very device-driven and being able to keep the game up with every new type of device. So I think that history is what made Pokemon so successful. I think it would be hard for somebody who has never had any history with anything, created brand new characters and a brand new type of game to be that successful in such a short amount of time. I think it's helped his history and all that. So, 30 years later, or I should say 20 years later, it's really paid off for him, and in a way that brand new game designers probably would have a hard time.
Yeah, I just have a comment here from Shannon. She says
Sure.
it's very easy to play and to be successful without paying into the app. There are players who pay and are the more competitive ones who want to keep up with the top gym leaders, but recreational playing doesn't require paying into the game. So that might, have something
that helps
to do.
a lot too. That's exactly right. Exactly right. And so, but I would imagine that they do that too, so that way they can over time turn those recreational players into paying players. So yeah, you might be a recreational player for like a few months, and like, oh, this is really fun, I want to play more. And so you may be able to keep it at a recreational level all the time, and then some people, you're absolutely right, some people might get addicted to that and then start paying as their familiarity with the game or as their competitiveness increases. But I think that's part of the appeal, is that you can do both, and for volume and users and everything. And that's why even for a Pokemon, $32 a person over the life of the game isn't that much. I'm sure there are some people who spend a lot more than that, and then there are some people who probably spend $5 and say, okay, I'll pay $5 here, a couple dollars there, and then that's it for them. So that's the thing in terms of they've designed it in a way that you can play at your level, you can play your intensity, and you can play probably at your own frequency, but because it's such a universal type of game and applicable to so many people, they don't need to make sure that you're spending $300 all the time.
Yeah, Devi, just a note. I mean, you're sounding a little tinny. You're kind of breaking up maybe just a little bit. So,
oh, I'm sorry.
So, we can hear you.
Let me just adjust.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just one more comment, another one from Shannon, sure. And this is a good point, is that there's no way to know where to catch certain Pokemon other than going to the place yourself or being told by someone else where to go. There's no secret map that has all the answers, which makes it a little more community driven.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I think that blends in with what I believe Brittany kind of alluded to, and we're going to cover that in a couple of slides. So these are great comments. Thank you very much. And Russell, do I sound less tinny now?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so then let's move on to the next slide.
Okay.
So let's spend a few moments on the financial strength. So these are pretty amazing in terms of it's the fastest game to reach $500 million in revenue. So because you have to think about it, there are probably games that are released all the time on the app stores. But within its launch, it reached $500 million in revenue the fastest. And then the same could be said for 1 billion. So the reason I put those two metrics up is, so because Pokemon's been around for 20 years, a lot of people are familiar with it. Okay, I can see them saying, okay, we can probably reach $500 million, right? Like they've been financially successful for 20 years. But it's really hard to then get it to $1 billion, because those initial users are going to, as with anything, you play so much and then you get sick of it, right? Like in terms of, then it's a matter of, but to have that longevity and that they were able to sustain it is what, people just didn't crash and burn and say, okay, I'm sick of it now and that's it, and they're off to the next one. People are coming back. But what's amazing is that at the height, and this was probably like late summer, early fall last year, they were making $18 million of revenue in a day. So that's, obviously this is worldwide, but to me that was just a crazy amount. And for all the, I'm sure there were some recreational people who are recreational players who thought, okay, you know what, maybe if I pay more, I can, who knows what motivated them to pay, but clearly a lot of people were paying in however much, from, $5 to $20 to $100 to maybe more. But it clearly became addictive for a lot of people. And then in terms of when we were talking about competition earlier, the users were spending 10 times more minutes per day on Pokemon than on other apps like WhatsApp, Instagram, and Snapchat, right? WhatsApp, Instagram, Snapchat are what I call like utility. They're communication types of apps. And if you think that Pokemon, the people are spending way more time on Pokemon than on what we consider now, Instagram and WhatsApp as basic communication, that's also, I would imagine that the executives at these apps, at these companies, were probably like, wait, why are your users not spending as much time? So they're clearly taking away time spent on these apps because of Pokemon. I'm sure it's probably normalized by now. But at the time, there were probably other apps or other things that probably got hurt because of Pokemon, because people were spending all their time there versus their app. So so let's take a pause here. And it sounds like, Russell, there may be other comments and questions that have come in.
Yeah, I've got one from Keenan, which is an interesting idea or thought. The game is about collecting and trading game. Humans love to collect things. This company captured that market and utilized it to its advantage, and that seems like a obvious,
that's right,
a point that makes sense to me.
Yeah, that's right. And so it's, you're absolutely right, that collecting nature, that I think that's probably what feeds the addictive nature of and the compulsion to be like, okay, let me play once more. Maybe I can collect more, right? Like in terms of, I think it's that they were able to capture and design it in a way that really spoke to human nature, and what can create. So we call it, the addictive behavior is what creates revenue. Generates revenue for these companies. So clearly they were able to design that game to trigger something very habitual in humans, right? Like whether it's, you absolutely hit it on the spot, whether it's collecting, whether it's being competitive, as somebody else talked about. So these are elements that were probably smartly designed in the game itself over years, and the device, because now it's before, if you thought about it, Game Boy or all these other games, you would have to carry around yet another device, right? Now you have one device that does everything. So your phone is the Game Boy. So it's also less to carry around, and that means that the game is available for you to play anytime. You don't have to carry two things and put one away and everything. So I think that's also part of what's fueling mobile games now, and especially something that's virtual reality, of you can interact with people and go places, right? Like in terms of, there's an exploration element too that's probably driving the behavior, as somebody else kind of alluded to. But I think there's even one more kind of major thing as part of that. And let's go to the next slide that we can spend a few minutes on this.
Okay.
So to me, one of the things that I think really drives the kind of the usage patterns of Pokemon and why it's become like such a pop culture hit, like it's part of everything that we, or for a while it's like I'd be driving down the road and then near a restaurant you see like 30 people gather and you've never seen them before, and kind of every time you drive by it's like, oh, they're probably playing Pokemon. And so in another random field you all see all these people with their phones out. Oh, okay, they must be playing Pokemon. But so then when you start to research this from a business perspective, well, I think this is what's part of the driving force behind its success. So they were really smart to have these partnerships, right? So Starbucks, is like close to a majority of their Starbucks are now Pokestops. And they're really integrating the experience of Pokemon within the store. So there's a Frappuccino that they specifically formulated as a special recipe, and it's available within the game and in real life in terms of you can literally order the Pokemon Frappuccino. It was limited for a while, but then I'm sure it'll be brought back later. But yeah, it is this type of partnership, this type of integration within the product, both virtually and in real life, that people begin to say, wow, it's part of my life, like I can really enjoy it, I can be part of this game, and I could enjoy it in other ways than just in the device. So that was one. And then also for the company, every time this random group of people show up, it's more business, right? And then the other thing is the Sprint store, which is pretty clever. So they also, in an effort to compete, they are also now Pokestop. So, who does Sprint compete with? T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T, right? Like these are all other places. But what did they do? They allowed players to recharge their phones. So it makes, like, it's great branding. It doesn't cost them anything except for electricity, right? Like in terms of, it's a really good way to get all these people in your store. Oh, well, oh yeah, you know what? I need new headphones. Oh yeah, my charger, I lost mine at home. Well, let me get one. These are all incremental sales for Sprint. It's a very smart business strategy. And so they were able to capture all these other, so what I'm saying is their users, the players of Pokemon, are a group that other businesses want to court. And by integrating it into the game or to the experience, it only helps users, number one, but more importantly, it kind of extends the life of Pokemon, and then they can kind of reinvest it back into the business. But it was quite remarkable to think that when Sprint announced this, their partnership with Pokemon, their stock jumped 7% in one day after the announcement. So this shows the kind of the financial value and the financial might of a game like Pokemon, which is just unheard of in terms of it's really captured average users, recreational users, heavy game players, the business community, pop culture, like you name it. It's a phenomenon that's really extended to all parts of kind of our lifestyle. So that, and to me, that's one of the kind of the most amazing things that Pokemon's been able to do, right? Like when you think about it 20 years ago, did they envision this? But they were able to keep up and really keep developing the game to be able to have it experienced in a way that they've never thought of before. Mm-hmm. And so, we'll take a pause here. And so, for those people who played it, how have you experienced the partnerships, or is that something that you paid attention to before? And now if you go back and play it, is this something that you'll notice or keep or observe it differently?
Okay. We don't have anything yet. Who's going to be the first? Okay. I don't have any posts at this point, so I think
Okay.
we'll
Yeah. So we'll keep continuing then.
okay, there we go.
And
There's one just had
okay.
it at Starbucks this morning. This is Shannon. Saw my Pokemon Go game that they have had special frap. I was curious, but had already ordered my drink.
Okay. Good. Yeah. So
so here's somebody who never knew about the Starbucks, Dominique, I guess. So she'll now have to change how she plays. Anybody else?
well, yeah, that's the thing in terms of it's they're really integrating the game with real life, right? Like in terms of before, I think the other games were like you play this game and it's a game. It doesn't kind of creep into your real life. And now it's like the lines between real life and your device are really blurred. And so I think we'll probably see more games like that, but I think they may have a harder time to compete and really get the awareness and the financial success of Pokemon. And part of that is just because Pokemon's been around for so long, and it's just a very smartly designed game, and it would be hard for somebody to kind of replicate that who hasn't had that same level of history. So so then why don't we move on, and then if there are other comments that come in, we can pause at that point.
Yeah, I've got a couple just before we go
okay.
on.
Sure.
Here's an interesting one. Pokemon Go drains the battery fast, so free charging is definitely an attractive perk. That was Shannon. Keenan, I've not played Pokemon, but I have noticed the marketing technique used to drive customers to partner stores. I'm in a small town. We don't have either a Sprint store or Starbucks. That's Francesca. Same here. Deanan, I'm in a small town. And just my own thoughts. I mean, this is kind of like something similar that you would see on TV where I think like when Rogue One came out, the Star Wars movie, there's a Rogue One car that kind of partnered with them on that. So there's another form of partnership that a business might take on to partner or to sell their products and basically help another company that they partner with.
That's exactly right. And the other thing is, different regions have different partnerships. So in the U.S., we're talking about Starbucks and Sprint. One of the things that I found in my research that I didn't put on the slide is in Japan, McDonald's is a big partner. So I think people have the ability to, they'll be able to see which ones are working kind of across the world. So you can see then how global it really is, that even though these are they want you to play local, but then the experiences and everything, it's really going to be, it's driven very globally, and it's that universal of appeal. So the comment came before of like humans like to collect and be competitive. That's clearly a global trait, right? Like they're really tapped into something that all humans have an element of. And so that's what I mean. The psychology behind it is just really clever. So yeah, I really appreciate all these comments that have come in. They're very perceptive.
Okay. I'll move on to the next one then.
Okay. And so we're so as part of kind of every webinar that we have, we like to take a step back and say, we're kind of recapping some of the business elements of what we talked about. I know we talked about Pokemon and kind of as a company, but then we've also, let's take a moment to say, well, from a business perspective, right, we talked about innovation. We talked about how the founder, through his tinkering of the Game Boy, he was able to start thinking about multiplayer gaming in a very different way, and that's what led to and because of jumps in technology and personal devices and phones, that he was able to make the leap into that pretty quickly. And then we spent some time on niche versus mainstream, right? Like that Game of War is considered a niche game. So it's fewer people play it, but those who do play it, probably they spend a lot of money on it. Whereas Pokemon is definitely considered a mainstream game, and it has a lot of users. You don't even have to pay to play, and those who do pay, they don't have to pay, they're not paying that much. And so, but they can do that because they're mainstream. They design the game so that they're not relying on somebody paying $300 a year on it. You can pay a little bit, you can pay nothing. And so that goes back into the game design and the kind of the psychology of gaming. So which is part of that vision, right? Like the game designers of Pokemon Go had a clear vision of to make it as universal as possible, to make it as inclusive as possible. It's not about age. You don't have to have a prerequisite skill. You don't have to have an interest in combat or in sports or anything like that, right? Like you just kind of show up to a physical location and everything like that to play and to catch the Pokemons. Technology, I mean, everything about that we're talking about is the foundation of everything we're talking about is technology. But more importantly, I think technology in a different way, combining technology with real life, whereas kind of things that came before that were like the games lived in your device, and it would be hard to say if Pokemon Go lives in your device or does it live in real life. So, and that's why I say the lines are blurred. We spent a lot of time on competition and competitive advantage and how Pokemon has really taken time away on the device from other apps. That's clearly documented by a lot of research. And in terms of competition, yeah, you can assume the competition is other mobile games, or you can assume the competition is other apps. You can assume the competition is TV. You can assume the competition is maybe talking to your friends and family, right? Like using the phone as a phone versus using the phone as a game device. And then obviously we just talked about global partnerships and growth strategy. The partnership model I think is very key, and we'll probably see more of them coming along. So within the first year, that the fact that they have two to three, and they probably have more in other countries, of very large names, and that they're strategic, right? I'm sure a lot of people want it to be a Pokestop, but what's in it for the user, right? Like Sprint is offering them like free charging. Starbucks created a special Frappuccino. I'm sure a lot of people would love the traffic of all the Pokemon users, but then what's in it for the Pokemon users? So I'm sure they have a criteria for evaluating partnerships. And then, lastly, growth strategy, and this is where we'll start to kind of, end our time today. So timely that we're talking today, because just last week, Pokemon announced kind of their revised game that they're releasing for the summer, and apparently that just sent the internet on fire because everyone's now crazy waiting for this new update. And so, and then I think they've also realized that this is probably going to be a very much of a summer game, and so they're just like how like the big budget movies, they release all the big blockbusters for the summer, and so that I think Pokemon is kind of replicating that cycle. So they're releasing the new game just in time for summer, because what are you going to do in the winter to catch Pokemons? It's more fun to play outside. It's kids are out of school. Summer's just kind of a relaxed state of mind and everything like that. So it makes sense that they're doing that. I'm not sure how much they actually like that was deliberate, or because of how people used it and how their usage fell off in the fall, that they're now saying it's really a summer game. I'm sure during the Game Boy days it probably was less seasonal, but now that it's a mobile app and it's virtual reality and you have to go outside and everything like that, I think now they realize how seasonal that it is, very much a seasonal game type of thing. So so we covered a lot today, and I so appreciate all the comments. They're great, and especially for you to be able to share your personal experiences. So on that note, why don't we move to the next slide, and then we can kind of take a moment to see what comments have come in.
Okay.
And so, as we kind of wrap up today, it's really to be able to say, like, what did you learn about Pokemon today? And for those who've kind of maybe heard about it and maybe haven't played it, how has your opinion changed? I know for me, I'll be, honest, I've never played Pokemon Go, but now if somebody wants to play it, I think I'd be the first one to say, yeah, I'll try it. Like, why not, right? Like, what's the harm? And I think now I would probably see the game in very differently because now that I understand the business success, whereas before I would have viewed it just as like, oh, it's another game to spend time on or whatever. And for those of you who are familiar with it, what advice would you have for the Pokemon executives? Like now that we've talked about it in a different way, maybe you've played it casually for a while, and now that you've learned about this, like how has your opinion changed, and what would you communicate to the team at Pokemon?
Okay, I'm waiting for some reactions here.
Sure.
Okay, here we go. Here's a couple. Francesca, I would suggest they allow trainers to fight the same way they had in the Game Boys. It would be a great addition. Colin, since Pokemon has had an established name, I don't think similar game could have worked without the background partners and taking card collecting and the Game Boy into the era of mobile phones. Uh, I would be willing to try this game.
Oh, good. Yep.
Shannon, I was most interested to learn about the founder's love and talent for video games, which resonates with me. It makes sense that Nintendo partnered with him. So,
yeah, apparently I was reading an article, and apparently like the founder's parents were like, you're spending so much time on video games, like where's your, like the same thing of like, where's your life going? And here's a classic case of one of those examples of, he was able to turn what he loves doing into an amazing, amazing career. And so, yes, video games could be a waste of time. They could be fun, or they could be your career. So as with anything, it could be like you can use that same concept of with gardening. You can say with cooking, like if there's a business to be made in a lot of different things if you know how to kind of bring it together.
Okay. I've got a couple others here. Let's see here. They're moving quickly here. Francesca, also the game when you walk, you find items. That is always fun and adds to looking and walking around. Always opens up a gate for partners to have special items. Let's see here. Okay, Brittany, I don't have an idea how they could make those folks feel included. Oh, okay, this is back to, okay, let me back up here. I'm sorry. Brittany indicates there's one downside which would change the whole dynamic of the game, is those folks who have a hard time getting around, can't really play. That's an untapped demographic of the game lovers. And particularly like some of our players here, or I mean our listeners here, indicated that they were in small towns, not a lot of possibility for Pokemon Go, so that might be one downside to it. It seems to be more popular in higher or in cities and large towns,
Right, in bigger towns. Yeah, that makes sense.
Dominic, definitely will play more now that I know more. Thank you. And I plan on owning a business, so that has helped me plan more. Francesca must be a Disney fan because she's had a couple of posts in here for Disney. Walt Disney loved to draw, so where would that be if he had not pursued it? Where would we be if he had not?
Yeah, you're right.
Let's see. I'd love a Pokemon theme park from Shannon.
Hey, the Lego has a theme park, right? You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. You should email them. You should tell
Yeah.
them that.
Keenan, advice to Pokemon chairman or executive, keep offering fun, low-priced entertainment and developing ways for new operations to, or new generations to enjoy. Let's see. Oh, Francesca indicates they have, I'm assuming you're talking about a theme park. They have one in Tokyo. So if anybody wants to go to
There you
Tokyo,
go.
you can visit the theme park
So,
there.
so we clearly have some big
Yeah,
Pokemon fans on the webinar today. This is
yeah,
wonderful.
yeah, definitely. So,
Well,
uh,
good. I learned a lot from everyone who participated. Thank you very much. That is the way we learn, right? Like in terms of it's the exchange of ideas, it's the exchange of comments, and being able to build off of each other. So, very much appreciate your participation and involvement. And like I said, the goal of these webinars is really to build upon what is in the Intro to Business course, because that's how you learn, right? Business is everything, right? Pokemon is a business. Yes, it's entertainment. Yes, it's fun, but it's because they built it very smartly that that we can then analyze it from that perspective, and those lessons can be applied to other businesses or other careers. So thank you, Russell, for all of your help today.
okay. Well, thank you, Devi, for joining us today. Appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with our students. And I want to thank everybody who attended the webinar. You had some great comments, and as Devi said, it seems like we have quite a few Pokemon fans here. Applying some of the things that you might have learned tonight. I know some of you, might be interested in starting your own businesses or something like that. And, some of the things that she talked about here, as she said, can be applied to other types of businesses as well. So with that, I just want to say that within about 24 hours or so, you'll receive an email from me with a link to complete a short survey. It's 3 quick questions, just to kind of gauge, your opinions about the webinar, and if you have any ideas for other webinars down the road. This is a series that we've been doing for probably about a year now, I think, and so we'll be picking another business to highlight and kind of go over for probably in a month or so. So if you fill out that survey, you might give us some ideas on what we might do for our next webinar. Also, we'll be posting the recording of this webinar to the Penn Foster community site. You'll see that in the academic business area. And if you want to listen to the recording again, it should be available later this week. So that about wraps it up for this evening. I appreciate everybody coming and participating, and have a great evening.
Yes, thank you so much. Have a great evening, everybody.
All righty. Good night.
Good night.